Shawn and Tara had always cherished their quiet retreats to the lakefront cabin in upstate New York, nestled deep in the woods. It was their haven, a sacred place to escape the hustle and bustle of the Big Apple. The cabin was secluded, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to hum with the whispers of nature. For Shawn and Tara, it wasn't just the peaceful scenery they loved, it was the tranquility they found in each other's company, away from the pressures of the outside world. Their faithful companion, a German Shepard named Gizmo, was more than just a pet. He was their child. Tara, unable to have children of her own, had poured all of her maternal love into Gizmo. The bond between them was undeniable. He was loyal, protective, and loving, a constant source of comfort. Shawn, too, felt a deep connection to Gizmo, who had become a vital part of their family and life. Together, the three of them formed an inseparable unit. The first few days at the cabin were perfect. The air was crisp, with the scent of pine, and the sunsets painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Gizmo reveled in the freedom of the open space, his paws pounding against the earth as he ran alongside the lake, chasing after sticks and splashing in the cool water. The evenings were spent curled up on the porch, sipping warm drinks and watching the stars emerge one by one, the peaceful silence of the forest surrounding them. But as the sun began to set on their fourth evening, something felt different. The air grew still, and a sense of unease began to settle over the cabin. Shawn, sitting on the couch, suddenly felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He glanced at Tara, who was reading by the fire, her attention captured by the flickering flames. Gizmo was the first to notice it. His usually calm demeanor shifted, his ears perking up as he stood at attention. His eyes were wide, his body tense. He let out a single, sharp bark, then another, more frantic this time. Shawn shot up from the couch. "Tara," he whispered urgently, his voice sounding concerned. "Get over here, quick." Tara, startled by the panic in Shawn's voice, rushed to his side. She followed his gaze out the window. Outside, in the deep shadows of the trees, a dark figure loomed, tall, menacing, and completely unnatural. It stood at least 12 feet tall, its silhouette distorted by the shifting shadows of the forest. The creature's dog-like head poked out from behind a tree, its glowing yellow eyes locked onto Shawn's with an unblinking stare. "What the hell is that?" Tara said. Her hands covered her mouth. "That ain't someone dressed up in a costume. Look at its eyes. Look how tall it is, Shawn." Tara clung to Shawn's arm, her voice a whisper of disbelief. What the fuck is that?" Before Shawn could answer, the creature vanished into the darkness, moving with an unnatural speed that left the air charged with an eerie tension. Shawn's heart was beating in his chest. Panic surged through him. "Go lock the windows. I'll lock the doors." Tara didn't need any further instruction. She rushed to close and lock the windows while Shawn hurried to grab his Mossberg shotgun from the closet. He loaded it with trembling hands, his mind scared and confused. The last thing he wanted was for Tara to see him scared, but the terror that gripped him was undeniable. "Take Gizmo to the bedroom," Shawn urged. "We don't know what that thing is." Tara nodded, her face pale as she clutched Gizmo close to her. She led him into the bedroom, her voice soft as she tried to soothe him, but even Gizmo seemed on edge, his hackles raised and his growls low and menacing. Shawn followed them into the room, securing the door behind him. He could feel the oppressive silence that had fallen over the cabin, the weight of uncertainty hanging in the air. The minutes dragged on in tense stillness. The only sound in the room was Gizmo's low growls as he stood guard by the window, his eyes scanning the forest outside. A loud crash broke the silence. It sounded like a bulldozer had knocked down the front door of their small cabin. The main entrance had been breached. Gizmo barked furiously, his barks filling the room with an urgency Shawn had never heard from him before. The hairs on Shawn's neck stood on end as he stood motionless, his finger hovering over the trigger of the shotgun. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, approached from the hallway, followed by what sounded like claws scraping against the walls. Then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence. The air around them, dead. Suddenly, the bedroom door was pounded in from its hinges, catching Shawn off guard and slamming into him, knocking him to the floor. The shotgun flew from his hands, skidding out of reach. Tara screamed as the abomination, a grotesque, towering monstrosity, stepped into the room. Its eyes were glowing with a malevolent hunger, and its mouth was twisted into a snarl, revealing rows of jagged, shark-like teeth. Before it could move toward them, Gizmo launched himself at the creature, his powerful jaws clamping down on its arm. The creature roared in pain, a guttural sound that reverberated through the cabin. It tried to shake Gizmo off, but the German Shepard held on, his growls ferocious as he fought to protect his family. Shawn scrambled to his feet, his mind clouded by fear and adrenaline. He grabbed his shotgun. The giant creature and Gizmo were scrambling around the room, fighting, knocking pictures off the wall and rolling around on the floor. Shawn aimed his shotgun, letting off rounds just beside the chaos, hoping that will scare the creature off. Too much chaos to get a clear shot at the beast. Shawn waited to get a clear, open shot, and when there was one available, he took it. He hit the creature, just grazing the side of its face and blowing half of its left ear off. It looked at Shawn and retaliated, its claws swiping at Shawn's face, leaving deep gashes in his skin. He stumbled backward, clutching his face, blood pouring from his cheek like a faucet where the creature's claws had torn into him. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing at that moment with the adrenaline flowing. Gizmo yipped, latching on even tighter to its arm. Gizmo was relentless. Despite the creature's superior size and strength, the loyal Shepard fought on. He tore at the creature's fur, biting and clawing with a fury Shawn had never seen before. The two beasts battled in the small room, a whirlwind of fury and violence. Shawn let out another round at the beast's left shoulder, pissing it off even more. This thing must have had armor under its fur, because it was built like a tank and only seemed to become more ferocious with each shot. Tara clung to him, her face full of tears. "Shawn, we need to get out of here." It was too late. The monster let out a deafening roar, its claws slicing the dog nearly in half, blood and intestines flying across the room. The creature's eyes locked onto Shawn, its gaze filled with hatred. It was like it was rubbing it in Shawn's face that it had killed his companion. Its chest was breathing heavily. Gizmo's blood covered its claws and snout. It looked at Shawn and Tara and had a huge grin on its face. Shawn cocked another round and went to shoot, but he was out of slugs. Without warning, it reached down and grabbed Gizmo's mutilated body and crashed through the bedroom window. Tara's sobs filled the room as she rushed to the spot where Gizmo had fallen. Shawn's hands trembled as he went out to get more slugs for the shotgun, rushing outside, firing blindly into the darkness, but the creature was gone. The woods were silent again. When daylight broke, Shawn and Tara ventured outside, their hearts heavy with grief. They found what was left of Gizmo's body near the edge of the forest, bloodied, limbs missing, and organs. Shawn fell to his knees, his heart breaking as he cradled Tara in his arms. Shawn's eyes burned with fury as he looked at Tara. "I'll kill it. I swear to you. I'm gonna fucking kill it." The following days passed in a blur. Tara tried to comfort Shawn, but neither of them knew how to cope with the devastation that had overtaken their lives. Gizmo had been more than just a dog. He had been their family. The cabin, once a place of joy and peace, had become a reminder of the evil that lurks in the woods. They buried Gizmo's remains in the city, far from the cabin and the dark woods that had stolen him away. Tara placed a small gravestone beside the tree where they had buried their beloved companion, the words etched into the stone, "In memory of Gizmo, forever loved, forever our boy." The grave was simple, but it spoke volumes about the love they had for him. Shawn couldn't find peace. He had never known a pain like this, a loss that gnawed at his insides with relentless hunger. The guilt and anger that consumed him only grew with each passing day. He couldn't let go of the memory of Gizmo's final moments, of the look in his lifeless eyes as that abomination dragged him into the darkness. And worse, he couldn't stop imagining the creature smiling at him and basically rubbing it in his face that he killed his loyal companion. No matter how hard Tara tried to talk him out of it, Shawn's mind was set. He had to return to the cabin. He needed closure. He needed to find and destroy the creature that had taken his best friend from him. "I'm going back to the cabin," Shawn declared one evening, his voice hard with determination. Tara's face fell. She had known this moment was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. "Shawn, please don't do this. We can't change what happened. We can't bring Gizmo back." Shawn's eyes burned with an intensity that made Tara take a step back. "I don't care. I won't rest until that thing is dead. It's the only way I can have peace." Tara wanted to argue, to tell him that this thirst for vengeance would only destroy him, but she saw the look in his eyes. She knew it was pointless. "So," she nodded. Her face was filled with sadness and worry. "I can't stop you, can I?" Shawn shook his head. "No, I have to do this for Gizmo." The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Shawn gathered ammunition for his shotgun and 45 ACP and everything he could possibly need for the hunt. His obsession with the creature consumed him. He spent hours researching cryptids that resembled a werewolf. One named came to mind: the Dogman. It seemed as though these beasts had haunted the woods for centuries, existing in the shadows of folklore and whispered warnings. There were YouTube channels dedicated to these creatures, real encounters and creepypastas. One channel described these Dogmen to a T: descent into the unknown. Shawn didn't care about the legends, though. He cared only about getting revenge on the Dogman that had torn his life apart. As the day drew closer for his return to the cabin, Shawn's focus grew sharper. The grief that had once paralyzed him began to fuel him, turning into something darker and more primal. Tara begged him to reconsider, but he wouldn't listen. He couldn't. Not until the creature was dead. Shawn returned to the cabin on a moonless night, the woods feeling more oppressive than he remembered. He felt the weight of the forest pressing in on him, but he refused to be intimidated. This was no longer the place of peace and solitude it had once been. To Shawn, it was now a battleground. The moment he stepped onto the porch, he knew something was wrong. The forest was silent, with a sense that something was watching him from the tree line. The silence was unnatural. Shawn's breath quickened as he scanned the forest, his hand resting on his shotgun slung across his chest. He came prepared. Shawn spent the night setting bear traps around the cabin, covering them with branches and leaves. He carefully rigged the cabin's front and back door, along with the windows, making sure there was no escape for the Dogman. His heart raced as he worked, his thoughts consumed by the desire for vengeance. He couldn't help but imagine the monster's twisted face as it had loomed in the doorway, its glowing eyes locked onto him. Every detail, every sound of that night was burned into his memory. Hours passed in the silence of the night. The anticipation was heavy in the air. Shawn's nerves were on edge, his every sense heightened. He could hear the rustling of the leaves in the wind, the occasional snap of a twig. But then, just as midnight approached, it came. The heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of heavy feet walking against the forest floor. The guttural growl echoed through the trees, and Shawn's blood ran cold, but with a bit of excitement to get revenge. The Dogman was back. He didn't hesitate. Shawn's heart pounded in his chest as he slowly got into shooting position behind the coach just beyond the entrance. The Dogman stopped 20 feet from the destroyed entrance of the cabin. It looked up and sniffed the air around it. "Come on, you son of a bitch." Shawn had set up a thin, tripwire booby trap at the entrance. If his plan worked, a thick 2x4 with sharp metal spikes nailed to it would activate from the inside. Its head snapped to the entrance quickly. Its glowing eyes locked onto Shawn with an eerie familiarity. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The creature growled again, a low, menacing sound that shook the cabin windows. It took a step forward, its massive form filling the doorway. It looked down at the almost invisible tripwire, grunted, and stepped over it. "Shit," Shawn whispered to himself. "So much for the bear traps," Shawn thought to himself. Shawn fired the first shot, and the bullet hit its mark, piercing the creature's shoulder, but the beast barely flinched. The Dogman let out a deafening roar and lunged at Shawn with lightning speed. Shawn dove to the side of the coach, narrowly avoiding the creature's deadly claws. He scrambled to his feet, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Shawn fired again, this time hitting the beast square in the chest. The shot rocked the Dogman, but it didn't stop coming forward. The creature was powerful, too fast. Shawn couldn't outrun it. He had to fight and stand his ground. Shawn ran from the entrance area to the kitchen, unloading slug after slug into the creature. The shots seemed to slow it down, but its thick, matted fur was like body armor. Running low on ammo, in a desperate move, Shawn retreated to the basement, slamming the door behind him. The Dogman followed, its claws raking and banging against the door with powerful force. Shawn reloaded his shotgun, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the creature pounded against the door. He could hear its snarls and growls as it tried to break through. The door was beginning to splinter and give way due to the force of the beast. This is payback. This is for Gizmo. The basement door bursted open. Shawn's pulse raced as he waited for the right moment to attack. He knew he couldn't waste any more time. The creature lunged once more, but Shawn was ready. He fired, the blast hitting the beast in the face and chest. The Dogman howled in pain, blood squirting everywhere. It dashed at Shawn, knocking the shotgun out of his hand and grabbing him by the throat, lifting him up in the air. Shawn struggled as the creature began strangling his neck, then digging its claws into his stomach. The pain was unimaginable as the Dogman's claws began to tickle Shawn's organs and intestines, blood spilling to the floor. Shawn's life began to flash in his eyes. Visions of Gizmo and his girl Tara entered his mind. Rage, anger, and the primal instinct to survive shot through Shawn's veins. He let out a war cry, remembering his .45 he had on his hip. He reached down, grabbed it, and blasted the beast in its eye, sending it whimpering backwards. Shawn dropped to the ground, gasping for air. He got up and aimed at the Dogman that was flailing around on the ground. Shawn put all 7 rounds into the Dogman's skull until the gun clicked empty. After that, he grabbed his Bowie knife from his belt and began to stab the beast repeatedly in its heart and neck, blood spraying all over him like he took a bloodbath. Shawn blacked out in a rage of violence. Flashbacks of his old companion entered his mind as he butchered the Dogman to death. This is for Gizmo. The creature let out shrieks of pain and helplessness. With one last breath, the creature stared at Shawn with its one eye. It coughed out a chunk of blood and grinned at Shawn one last time before its body twitched and went limp. Shawn got up and stood over the creature, his body covered in blood and sweat, his chest heaving as he fought to catch his breath. He held his hand over his wounded stomach, trying to stop the bleeding. He had done it. He had avenged Gizmo. The silence that followed the creature's death was deafening. Shawn stood there, bloodied and exhausted, staring down at the lifeless body of the Dogman. His hands shook as he wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to steady his breathing. But despite the creature's death, the victory didn't feel like a relief. The pain of losing Gizmo, the grief that had consumed Shawn ever since that fateful night, was still there, gnawing at him. He had avenged his boy, but the hole in his heart remained unfilled and raw. Shawn collapsed against the wall of the basement. His vision blurred from exhaustion and blood loss, but he didn't care. He had done what he had come to do. He had honored Gizmo's memory by killing the creature that had taken him. He sat there for what felt like hours, his mind drifting between the past and the present. Finally, with great effort, Shawn rose to his feet. He left the basement, his eyes scanning the cabin one last time. The blood on the floor was a grim reminder of the battle that had unfolded within these walls. But there was no time to dwell on it. He had to go back to Tara. He had to tell her that it was over. Shawn staggered out into the night, the chill air biting at his skin as he made his way back to the truck. The journey back to the city felt longer than it had before, the weight of what he had done pressing down on him with every mile. Tara was waiting for him, he knew. And when he got home, she would be there to hold him, to comfort him, to help him begin to heal. But as he drove, something gnawed at him, something that he couldn't shake. It wasn't just the loss of Gizmo, though that pain would stay with him forever. It was the realization that the woods had taken something from him, something more than just his dog. The woods had taken his peace, his sense of safety. He no longer felt the calm that had once defined the cabin, the retreat that had been their sanctuary. Now, it felt tainted, marked by blood and violence. Together, Shawn and Tara had found a way to carry their loss with them, not as a weight, but as a part of who they were. Shawn had faced the monster in the woods, but he had also faced the monsters within himself. And in the end, they had emerged stronger, bound by love and the unbreakable bond of family. That's what Gizmo would have wanted. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.